Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. We're early in the new year, and there is a lot of news on the Michigan athletic scene. My guest today is one of our favorites, Chris Balas from thewolverine.com. Before he joins us, a few of my thoughts to get us started. I'm happy that Jim signed his extension and we can now focus on putting last year behind us and getting ready for a new season. I know a lot of you wanted Jim gone and a fresh start, but the reality is starting over would have meant another rebuilding cycle. We've been through that twice with Brady and Rich Rod in very recent memory. I'm not interested in going through that again, at least not right now. Am I happy with the state of Michigan football? No, not even a little bit. For me, it comes down to this. Either you blow it up and start from scratch, or you give Jim the chance to get this thing back on track. I'm as frustrated as many of you, but I don't want to press the nuclear button yet. I'm willing to let Jim sort things out and right the ship, and we aren't where we thought we'd be 6 years into the Harbaugh era, but that's life. We have to deal with where we are as a program and get it fixed. Now, it's not going to be easy, but we have plenty of talent. We do need an attitude adjustment. Jim says he gets it and knows even with an extension, the patience of the faithful is running out. Jim needs to re-engage with this program, and he needs to make big changes, so stay tuned. Another of those changes was made today. We learned that Mike Hart is coming from Indiana to be the new backfield coach. He has earned high praise for the job he's done at IU. So welcome home, Mike Hart, our all-time leading rusher. Jay Harbaugh will now be the special teams coach, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more on that hire and other moves on the coaching staff very soon. My guest today says the fix for football will not be instant. It might not even be evident next season. But until then, we do have some things to be excited about. One of those is Juwan Howard and what he is doing with his team. Last night, we picked up another huge win against Wisconsin, and it was an impressive performance. Joining me next on this week's Game Day segment is Chris Balas from thewolverine.com, here on the Michigan Man, so stay with us. Here with us on our Game Day segment to talk about the Jim Harbaugh contract, Michigan football, even a little hoops, is Chris Balas from thewolverine.com. Happy New Year. Welcome back, Chris.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Well, before we get into the Jim Harbaugh situation in Michigan football, Chris, last night was the national championship game. We all know what happened there, but your thoughts on that game?
I thought it'd be a little closer, to be honest with you, after I saw what Ohio State did to Clemson. But, man, Alabama's just a machine. They look like a semi-pro team, and it's unbelievable. And it's not just the bodies and everything else and how they recruit, but it's how well coached they are. And watching some of the offensive plays and the creativity, they do everything unbelievably well. So people can talk about, shenanigans and everything else, but you have to admire the excellence in every aspect of that program and the demand for excellence too, because some of the play calls, man, you're like, wow, you're just blown away. And, the way they use their speed and the way they get their guys open is pretty impressive. So I think I don't know that it's a program you want to aspire to if you're a Michigan or a Notre Dame, for example, but it's certainly there are things that you can learn in terms of scheming and play calling and culture, because that is one hell of a football team. There's no question about it.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a very impressive performance. They are just, as you said, stacked. I think at one point last night they were saying that 13 Alabama players are graded out in the high rounds of the next draft.
Yeah. I mean, how do you compete with that? You don't. And it's sad because there are about 3 or 4 programs that are hoarding the majority of the talent. And I'm not sure what they expected to happen when they decided, okay, it's going to be a 4-team playoff. You're going to have a handful of programs that are going to do whatever they can to get there, by any means necessary. And everybody else is going to be an afterthought. And that's at least with the bowl season back in the day. And this is going to come across as a get off my lawn type of thing, but bowl games mattered. Now you've got kids sitting out Rose Bowls and, not BCS, but New Year's Six Bowls and everything else, and has made a lot of college football irrelevant. And it's depressing. It's not what it used to be, and it doesn't feel like college football to me, and or what it's supposed to be. And that's the disappointing part of this. Now, I think you're going to see them eventually expand the playoff to 8 or 12 teams, which they need to do. Although it was interesting listening to Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren talk about this the other day, and he said he wouldn't vote for it right now, expanding it beyond 4. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? But I think we'll get there, and then there will be more teams with more to play for. But as of right now, it's boring. Flat out, I'm sorry. People can say what they want to, but it's boring watching the same teams over and over again. And now I know what it feels like, when for fans who rooted against the Patriots, New England Patriots. Oh, they're here again. What else is on? So, but there's no question that these are good programs. And but you know what? The talent needs to be spread across more teams here, and that just doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon.
Closer to home, Jim Harbaugh finally signed his extension last week. Were you surprised the process seemed to take so long?
No, because initially, when you saw what his new contract was, $4 million, it was cut in half and a lot of incentives. And I think there was a negotiation going on, and there was no question about it. Early in the process, when we heard that, his contract was going to be lower, and he was telling people, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to come back and bet on myself. And he was looking for coaches, assistant coaches, and he needed, he was not only negotiating for himself, but for his assistants. And there are going to be a handful that stay. Ed Warner, for example, on the offensive line, Sharon Moore, tight ends coach, and they're going to need some more money for these guys. And you're going to need more money for if you bring in another offensive assistant, which they're still talking about doing, and the staff still needs to play out. So I expected, Jim Harbaugh is who he is, and that's, it's like he said this summer. He said there are bigger fish to fry, and when it got right down to it, when the season ended, he started working on it. So the end result here is we really have no idea what to expect with the new staff. But I was thinking last night, Mike, watching Alabama march up and down the field, that Don Brown, for all the heat he's taken, has had the most success against Alabama of just about any program in the last 2 years.
Right.
And I'm thinking, boy, he did some good things here. And this is kind of college football today, where elite offenses are going to be really, really hard to stop. And so it's going to be really tough. If Mike Macdonald's the guy, as they're saying he is, and as we're hearing he is, and he's got no experience. He's with the Baltimore Ravens right now as a linebackers coach, and it sounds like he's going to be at least one of Michigan's defensive coordinators. He's got some big shoes to fill, because Don Brown, up until this year, really had a nice resume, with the exception of some big games against elite programs, like just about everybody else out there. Brett Venables at Clemson. If you look at what happened last night, Kerry Combs, and with Ohio State. So it's going to be a tall task, but. Anyway, I got off on a tangent there a little bit, but I'm sorry about that. But I will say this: he's got it built. Jim Harbaugh's got a lot to prove. There's no question about that this fall.
No, you just mentioned the defensive coordinator candidate, Mike Macdonald. According to a lot of reports, it's a done deal. Is Jim still interviewing other people, or is it really close to being a done deal?
I think it is basically a done deal, and they're just waiting for his season to end. Obviously, the Ravens are still playing, so the longer it goes, the longer it's going to take. So we continue to hear Tim Banks' name at Penn State as a potential co-defensive coordinator candidate. He's an outstanding recruiter from Detroit, played at Central Michigan. I've actually know people who played with him at Central Michigan say he's a great guy, and they think highly of him, especially as a recruiter. So that's something that you can keep an eye on as well. We're hearing that Mike Zordich, the cornerbacks coach, is going to have to re-interview for his job. But it sounds like Sean Nua, the defensive line coach, and the linebackers coach, Brian Jean Mary, are both going to be back. So it's really the offensive side of the ball that we don't know a lot about yet, other than Ben McDaniels is likely gone, and Jim Harbaugh is going to be hands-on coaching the quarterbacks. Beyond that, will they bring in another offensive coordinator to go with Josh Gaddis? Will they bring in another running backs coach and move Jay Harbaugh specifically to special teams? Those are things we're keeping an eye on.
One of the names you hear mentioned off and on in the last couple of weeks on the offensive side has been Joe Moorhead as a possible addition to the staff. And that's really interesting, because then you wonder, What happens with Gaddis?
Right, yeah, and we have heard his name several times from several different people. Haven't heard anything on that one for about a week now, and so we're not sure if that means it's not going to happen. If Jim Harbaugh is not looking for offensive coordinators, other potential play callers to bring in now, it's just gone silent, and I think that's probably a good thing when you're out there looking for coaches who are with other teams. So we don't know, but we do know that it was an option at least at one point. And, based on what the offense didn't accomplish, frankly, in the fall last year, they looked terrible.
Yeah.
And this is an offensive game now. If you look at last night and you look at Alabama and you look at Ohio State, we just talked about this. Even the best defenses are getting run on now all over the place. You look at Clemson, you look at Ohio State, even Alabama had some games this year where they gave up huge amounts of points. And there are going to be games in which you just can't stop people. That's just the way it is. The athletes are just too good now, and you can only scheme so much for intricate offenses anymore. So it's going to be one of those things that we'll watch closely. But it's tough, man. It's tough in this day and age of college football because you look at your own team and you say, man, that's just not good enough. You can't watch your team in a bubble. You have to look at college football and see what's going on there. And man, it's unbelievable what these offenses are accomplishing today.
Well, there is no doubt much work that needs to be done this offseason on both sides of the ball. And if you believe people like Urban Meyer and others, Jim has to lift the hood, so to speak, and see why the system isn't working and fix the culture. You hear that word culture bandied about a lot. When I hear all that, I think, how do you get that done? Where do you start?
With yourself and holding people accountable and not letting the inmates run the asylum. If you've got attitude problems, if they're your best players, then you're in trouble. Every good coach has always said, my best players are my hardest workers and are my best leaders. And that hasn't been the case at Michigan in the last few years, frankly, with the exception of guys like Devin Bush, who was banged up, but still skipped the bowl game, and I don't think that went over very well with a lot of people and a lot of his teammates. And but that's where we are, at least at Michigan. If you look at Ohio State, you don't see guys missing bowl games and skipping bowl games. It doesn't seem to happen at the same level anyway. So, and you need to weed out the guys that are the complainers and the guys that aren't all in. And I was talking about this the other day with somebody. You want to look at a great culture. You look at what John Beilein and Juwan Howard have built with Michigan basketball. And Juwan said this the other day. He says, I don't have guys out there that are saying I, and me. They just want to win. They share the ball incredibly well. And that's something that is beautiful to behold. And you don't see that at Michigan. You see a lot of guys that are kind of biding their time at this point to get to the NFL. And Jim Harbaugh needs to sit down with these guys and reset the expectation and say, look, man, if you're not all in, then you don't belong here. And, the team speech that Bo Schembechler gave so many years ago, and that's plastered all over the buildings at Michigan, rings hollow right now, in my opinion. I don't see enough guys that are really following that mantra. They are really a lot of guys out for themselves, and that starts with the coaching staff reestablishing the expectation here.
That's shocking to hear things like that. I don't think we ever thought we'd have malcontents on the team or guys not buying into the program, et cetera, et cetera. So it's almost like a rebuilding situation in that sense. It's going to take time to straighten that out, isn't it?
Possibly, but I go back to, remember Mark D'Antonio's 3-9 team at Michigan State, and they had a lot of the same issues. And the next year they bounced back and had a pretty solid year. So once they got rid of some of those guys in the locker room that just weren't all in, and, you can do it if you have the talent for it. And there's some talent here. There's no question about it. You look at the offensive line, for example. I think there's a lot of talent there. You're going to have some talent at the skill position players with some of the young guys, the Roman Wilsons, A.J. Hennings. You're hoping that your quarterbacks, Caden McNamara or J.J. McCarthy coming in as a true freshman can be that guy. And you've got some running backs there with ability. But the defense is what scares you. And you just saw the lack of beef up front and the lack of great linebacker play, and then the corners getting abused, and it's they've got some work to do there. So, but you can do a lot if you look, for example, at your programs like Northwestern. You can do a lot with a lot of guys that like to play together, and there's enough talent there to be at least that good, frankly, and they need to figure that out. figure out how to get it done. And the kids on the team, too, need to hold those guys accountable as well and say, hey, man, if you're not all in, then get the heck out, because that's not how you win football games in this day and age.
You also think about the recruiting aspect. When you look at the classes that Jim's brought in over the last 5 or 6 years, very good classes. Maybe none would be considered elite. You always hear that maybe the first 10 players are the top of the class. You can compete with anyone, but at the lower end of the class, we've got a lot of 3-stars, it seems, over the last few years. Does Jim need to rethink his entire recruiting process right now?
I think that's a fair question. And I think what he needs to do is trust himself again and not worry about the stars and go out and get football players and not recruit from lists. And I think he's depended a lot on too many people that saying, hey, this guy's a 4-star and we need to go get him. What Jim Harbaugh used to do at Stanford was identify guys that he thought were great football players and bring them in. And I use this example a lot. Luke Kuechly, who was an All-Pro with the Carolina Panthers, this was a guy that Jim Harbaugh said he had to have. He was a 3-star prospect when he was at Stanford, and I think he ended up at Boston College out of Cincinnati. But he said that guy's a football player, that guy would fit, and they need to do a better job of that and finding these guys. And again, doing the whole behind-the-scenes look at who these guys really are, and that's what Lloyd Carr and his guys did so well. Fred Jackson, his running backs coach, once told me, he said, I would go in and talk to the mom, and I would go in and talk to the principal, and I'd go talk to the kids' teachers, and we knew if this kid was going to fit our culture. And that's how you decided whether or not a kid was Michigan material. And I think they need to get back to doing some of that, because you've got starters now that are opting out and transferring to, and I'm going to bring him up, Zach Carpenter, your starting center for a while, transferring to another program within your division to Indiana. That should never happen.
No.
And you need to do a little bit more homework here and figure out what you're getting into here. And I'm not saying that I'm not ripping on the kid. I'm just saying that should never happen. It should never be a case at a place like Michigan where something like that happens.
Well, part of me would like to think we are in some ways overreacting to the season we just witnessed. And, it was played during a pandemic. Very young team, a lot of injuries. And I've got to believe this coming season is going to be a different story, Chris. And call me overly optimistic, but there's a lot that needs to be fixed. But as you mentioned with Coach D'Antonio many years ago, it can be done, can't it?
Yeah, and this really is the anomaly season for Jim Harbaugh. He's had some success in every one of his other seasons, not the kind of success that Michigan fans had envisioned or hoped for when he was hired and made the 4th highest paid coach in college football. But if you look at even last year, not this season, but the season before, you pummeled a Notre Dame team that made the playoff this year. You destroyed them. You destroyed Michigan State. You had some good wins, and in 2016 they were a horribly officiated game away from being the Big Ten champion, or at least getting to the Big Ten championship game. And even in 2018, when they got destroyed up in Columbus, had Maryland made a simple 2-point conversion, Michigan's your Big Ten East champion before they even play that game. So, I mean, he's done some things, and he's been right there on the brink. But, it's getting to that next level. And so this year was really the anomaly, and you're hoping that, this is just one of those weird things. And you watching those kids come out of the tunnel, for example, this year, there was no fire, and it was tough. It's hard to put into words how weird it is being in that stadium and watching them play when there's nobody there. And I can only imagine what it's like for those kids. And I'm not giving them any excuses, because other schools, for example, Indiana, played extremely hard and extremely well in different scenarios. But when you go into the big house, man, and it's a mausoleum like that, I can only imagine. And in talking to some of these kids and their parents, they said it was deflating running out there and playing in front of an empty stadium. So, you can give them the benefit of the doubt, and I think that's kind of what Ward Manuel did with Jim Harbaugh and extending him a new contract. I think at a lot of other schools they would have been looking for ways to get rid of Jim Harbaugh, but you know what? He's got a chance now to prove himself again, and I think he's got enough talent. And if he is the coach that he was, 5-10 years ago, I think there's a possibility that we can see a much better season this year.
Well, let's hope so. We'll have a lot to talk about here in the coming weeks and months as we prepare for next season. But let's switch gears right now and talk about Michigan hoops, which is right now a much more enjoyable topic. We're taping on Tuesday morning, so we play Wisconsin tonight at Chrysler. they are just playing incredibly well right now, aren't they, Chris?
They are, and it's fun to watch. And the one thing that I'll say, I had my doubts, and Dan Dockich, the ESPN analyst, brought this up, and he said, a lot of people thought that Ward Manuel was winning the press conference with the Juwan Howard hire, and I'll be honest, I was one of them. I'm like, okay, he's never been a head coach before, and yeah, he's got a lot of basketball experience, but no head coaching experience, and he made some mistakes early on recruiting and on the court, but it's amazing how he's adjusted, and it is amazing watching his actions and some of the offense on the court. The guy can coach flat out, and he'll continue to get better and better, and that's been a revelation to me, and it couldn't happen to a better guy, frankly, in talking to him and talking to people around him. What a down-to-earth guy he is for a guy who's made all that money and had the success that he has. And I worried a little bit about the culture. And are they going to just bring in 5 stars here? And is it just going to be a one-and-done factory? And it's been anything but. Guys like Hunter Dickinson, who I think will be here more than 1 year, even though he's had an unbelievable freshman year at Michigan Center, have completely bought into the program and to the culture that John Beilein established and Juwan Howard has continued, and that's been the big thing. So, but this team right now, I'll tell you what, there's still some big games to play, and I know everybody's saying, oh, Michigan's a Big Ten favorite now. It's a little early for that, but there's no question that Juwan Howard can coach, and that you've got a team of guys that have bought in, and it certainly is fun to watch.
Especially fun to watch freshman Hunter Dickinson. I think we are all shocked, maybe not shocked, but surprised at how well he's done this year so far through 10 games. But in the coming weeks, he has some big boy matchups in the Big Ten that are going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and, it started with Leon Robbins, who was the player of the week, the national player of the week for Minnesota, and he dominated him, 28 points to 5, and he can't be stopped. I think shocked is actually a good word, Mike, because this kid is one of the top 6 players in the country right now in consideration for National Player of the Year, according to KenPom.com, the way he's playing. And what Richard Pitino said, Minnesota's coach, he's like, he gets that ball near the rim, and that thing goes in, 73%. And these aren't all easy shots. I get that he's 7'2", and he's pretty close to the rim. But if he's 5 feet away, a little hook shot, it dies at the rim and it goes in. He's got this little 12-foot jump shot now that he's developed. And the kid has been phenomenal. And it's not just the offense, though. It's directing traffic on defense. He is wise beyond his years. His basketball IQ is unbelievable. Now, there are going to be teams that are going to play him left and make him go right, and he's going to see more double teams, much more. But that's going to open things up on the perimeter. We saw it against Northwestern when Northwestern tried the strategy to double him, that Michigan hit 3 3-pointers right before the end of the half on good looks as a result, and pulled away. So this is a tough team to guard when you've got a guy like that in the middle who might be literally the best post player in the country when it comes to a back to the basket guy. And only 10 games into his freshman year, this kid's going to continue to be fun to watch.
Oh, absolutely. And along with Hunter, the biggest surprise to me so far has been the point play of Mike Smith. Another great move by Juwan, bringing in a kid like this. And I know a lot of fans said, oh, he was an Ivy League point guard. This is going to be a huge transition. But I love the way this kid plays, Chris.
Yeah, he was a volume shooter there at Columbia. And we thought, okay, is he going to play to get his? He plays with the ball somewhat like Xavier Simpson. He's not Xavier Simpson in terms on offense. First of all, he's a better shooter, but the way he passes the ball and gets into the lane, I think a lot of people were concerned that he wasn't going to be able to finish, or maybe he wasn't going to be the passer. And what's he going to do? Is he going to pull up and shoot all the time? This kid distributes well, and he wants to win too, and you can see it. They only won, I think, 6 games last year at Columbia. This kid just wants to win, and the way he runs the offense is pretty phenomenal, and the way he fits in, and that's the beauty of this team. That Shawnee Browns, who came from Wake Forest, and the Mike Smiths, and how they really bought into the culture, and how well they've played their roles has been phenomenal. Eli Brooks is another one as your defensive stopper. Who would have said that about him 4 years ago when he first got here? Nobody. And that's what you love about this team. But there's no question, man. Mike Smith has been phenomenal, fun to watch, and I think you're going to continue to see him get better as well as he gets more and more comfortable.
And I think as a team, we haven't seen this team peak yet. I mean, Franz Wagner got off to a slow start the last few games out. He's been big time on both ends of the floor. And I get the feeling he's sort of just warming up, Chris, and he's a defensive matchup problem at that 3 position at 6'9" for just about any team, isn't he?
Yeah, and the way he defends, even when he's not playing well, he doesn't, on offense, it doesn't affect his defense, and that's what I love about him. He is hard to get around, and he is, even when you do, he's got that length, ridiculous length, and that's what's so good about this Michigan team is the length on defense. They take away those passing lanes, and I don't think Isaiah Livers, we haven't seen his best either. If you'd said at the beginning of the year, Mike, that Franz Wagner and Isaiah Livers were going to be inconsistent and they're going to have some good games, some bad games, that, okay, maybe they get off to a little bit of a rocky start, but you've got other pieces picking it up. But we mentioned Shondy Brown, for example. He's had some huge games from 3, and his hustle on defense and what he brings there. So you're going to see Wagner get better and better. You're going to see more from Isaiah Livers. This team hasn't shot the ball as well as it can yet. I think you're going to see that improve as well. So I don't think there's any question. Listening to Dan Dakich talk, he said this is a potential Final Four team. He thinks it's one of the best teams in the country. I agree with him. And again, we've got there are bigger tests to come, but certainly, in my opinion, and especially we'll know more at the end of this week, they play Wisconsin and then at Minnesota. You're going to see possibly this team emerge as the favorite in the Big Ten. If not, I think they'll be right there until the end.
Getting back to Juwan Howard for just a minute again, Chris, in his second season, but you really can't say enough about the direction he has this program headed in, can you?
No, you can't. Number 1 recruiting class coming in next year, and recruiting the recruitable 5 stars is one of the things he's learned. Initially, I was concerned he was throwing out offers to just about everybody in the top 20. And I'm thinking, okay, are you doing your homework here? We talked about culture, right? And it's like, have you done your homework on these kids? But that's something that he's learned quickly, and maybe Phil Martelli helped him out there too, his right-hand man, assistant coach from St. Joe. Isaiah Todd, for example, here's a 5-star kid that we knew was never going to play college ball, was committed to Michigan, and we're thinking, okay, he's probably taking somebody else's spot. You could be recruiting somebody else. This kid's probably going to be going to the G League right away out of school, and that's exactly what happened. But he's learned quickly, and he's taken the lead on some of these recruits that are coming in. Caleb Houston, for example, next year, and really made them a priority and done a great job getting to know their families and these kids and putting in the time and effort. So these kids we're recruitable 5 stars, but they're also program and culture guys, and those guys are hard to find. And I think that's why this thing's going to keep rolling. You've got a culture first program, and that's the most important thing to Juwan Howard. We saw it with the Fab Five people. You can say what you want to about them, but those guys played for each other, and they played to win. There were really no egos when it came to basketball about getting theirs. They all played together, and I think that is where Juwan Howard learned it, and I think that he has seen that with the Miami Heat, and that is, to me, his biggest strength is understanding the culture and building toward it, even with those elite guys, and that's why I think this thing's going to continue to roll.
Well, some final thoughts before we let you get away, Chris. And a lot of times with a busy winter athletics season, even with all the COVID business, I feel remiss about not spending more time on Coach Pearson's hockey team and Coach Barnes-Arico's women's basketball team. But they are both having big-time starts so far, aren't they?
Yeah, and it reminds me of, when Michigan State was in its heyday and both of their basketball programs were rolling, and that's where Michigan basketball is now. There was a time when Michigan women's basketball was a laughingstock, was kind of a joke, and it's amazing what she's done, and it's fun to watch. So I think that team's going to continue to get better and better. And I think Mel Pearson's team was a disappointing weekend. Splitting with Michigan State, you win 9-0, and you're sitting there feeling really good about yourself, and then you blow a game, you give it away in the last 2 minutes in a period in which I think they'd allowed one shot on goal. They end up losing a game 3-2 that they had no business losing. And this team's better than 6-6 right now, and they should be anyway, which is I think what they are in Big Ten play. And there's a lot of good young talent. But I don't think that Mel, and I think he said this, he said these guys need to learn, how to get down and dirty and a little bit more gritty at times and, not just rely on that talent when it comes to winning. But his teams have improved. as the season has gone on. But it's tough to watch how inconsistent they've been, given that you see them skate and you're like, wow, there's a more talent that we've seen on the ice at one time than in a long, long time. So, but that's hockey. You can lose games in which you outplay teams. That's been that way, forever. And they just got to figure out how to finish some games. And I think you'll still see the best from this team here by the end of the year, and they'll continue to get better and better.
Oh, I think so too. Really do. So our guest today has been Chris Balas from thewolverine.com. Always great to have you on the show, Chris. There's so much going on, and I'm sure we'll have you back soon, and we look forward to that next visit.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me, buddy.
On Quick Hits today, basketball will be back in action this Saturday up at the Barn against Minnesota. It will be another big road test at a place we have struggled at for years. Tip-off time is 2 p.m. We are 11-0 heading into the game and ranked number 5 in the country. Michigan women's hoops will be back on the road Thursday when they take on Wisconsin up in Madison. The game is set for a 7 p.m. Central Standard Time tip-off and will be broadcast live on the Big Ten Network. They are ranked number 15 with a perfect record of 9-0 overall, 4-0 in Big Ten play. Number 9 ranked hockey, 6-0 overall, 4-6-1 in the Big Ten, will host rival Ohio State on Friday and Saturday at Yost Ice Arena. Both games are scheduled for 7 p.m. puck drops. Friday's game will be streamed live on Big Ten Network Plus, while Saturday's contest will be broadcast live on the Big Ten Network. We are still waiting to see when softball and baseball will get underway this spring. It looks like no trips south or west this year, so probably a Big Ten only schedule. Hopefully we'll have some news in the coming weeks. On next week's show, my scheduled guest will be Steve Lorenz from 24/7 Sports. We'll get a recruiting update and discuss what's going on with assistant coaching searches and much more. And then we'll spend some more time in the coming weeks on Michigan basketball, as it looks like we're going to be in the Big Ten race all the way, and who knows how good this team will be by March. It's going to be a fun winter watching them, so make sure you join us. That will do it for now, though. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!